The Cartographer of Dead Stars. A story of obsession, ancient maps, and the terrifying truth behind a breadcrumb trail left across 20,000 years. The transmission lasted exactly 0.4 seconds. That was what archivist Voss Rowland noted first. Not the content, not the coordinates embedded in the carrier wave, not even the fact that the signal originated from a sector that had been classified as dead vacuum for longer than recorded Dominion history. She noted the duration. Because 0.4 seconds was a very specific length. It matched no known natural phenomenon. It matched no modern communication protocol. But it did match something she had read about 3 years earlier in a deteriorating data folio recovered from a krill excavation site on the edge of the Hollow Drift. A folio written in ancient Terran code, describing what early humans had called a heartbeat signal, a pulse transmitted at irregular intervals over centuries, designed to be so brief that no automated system would flag it as intentional. Designed to be found only by someone who was already looking. Voss had been looking for a long time. She was not a commander. She held no military rank, commanded no ship of consequence. Her office was a converted storage bay on the lower decks of the Dominion Research Station Orthvel, stacked floor to ceiling with physical data cores, holographic star charts, and 11 years' worth of notes written in a shorthand only she could read. The station's director, a broad-shouldered Falari named Goveth, had stopped checking in on her work after the 3rd year. Her budget had been reduced twice. Her assistant had requested a transfer to a more active department. None of that had slowed her, because 6 years before the 0.4-second pulse, Voss had found something in the navigational logs of a long-decommissioned Dominion survey drone, a microcorrection, a tiny, automated course adjustment the drone had made while passing through Sector 7R, a region of space so thoroughly unremarkable that it appeared on exactly 0 active mission rosters. The correction was logged as a gravitational anomaly. It was 4 pages deep in a technical report that no living person had read in 80 years. Voss had read it, and then she had pulled the gravitational data for that sector, and found that there was no gravitational anomaly. The drone had been nudged. Something had reached out, invisibly, and adjusted its heading by 0.0003 degrees. Not enough to change its mission, just enough to be noticed by someone who was paying very close attention. That was when she started the map. The map. It took 3 years to build. She cross-referenced every piece of navigational data she could access. Survey drone logs, FTL drive calibration records, even the maintenance reports from the subspace relay towers that formed the backbone of Dominion communication infrastructure. She was looking for the same thing each time. Micro-corrections. Tiny, unexplained nudges. Adjustments so small they were always attributed to background gravitational noise or equipment drift. There were hundreds of them, stretching back centuries. And when she plotted them all on a star chart, overlaying the vectors and the timing, they formed something unmistakable. An arrow. Not a metaphorical arrow. A literal one. Thousands of micro-corrections, spanning 200 years and dozens of different vessels and relay towers, all combining into a single coherent navigational pointer aimed at one specific region of deep space. A region with no stars, no planets, no charted phenomena of any kind, just emptiness, and apparently a heartbeat. She had submitted a formal research proposal the following month, requesting a survey vessel and a crew of 4. Goveth had denied it. She had submitted again, with additional supporting data. Denied. She had escalated to the Dominion Historical Commission. They had sent an automated response thanking her for her interest and informing her that her request had been logged for review. That had been 14 months ago. So Voss had done what any reasonable scientist with an unreasonable obsession eventually does. She had borrowed a ship, the Drift. The Kethera was a decommissioned single-crew science skiff, technically the property of Orthvel's equipment pool, technically available for short-range survey missions, technically not rated for the kind of deep drift navigation Voss had in mind. She filed the paperwork as a navigational calibration run and departed before anyone thought to read it carefully. The journey to Sector 7 took 9 days. The first 7 were uneventful. She ran diagnostics, reviewed her data, slept in 4-hour cycles, and ate nutrition paste from vacuum-sealed pouches that tasted like compressed apology. She had brought 11 separate backup copies of her map. 3 were encrypted. 2 had false trails built into them, in case someone tried to follow her work and reached incorrect conclusions. She was meticulous that way. On the 8th day, the relay towers started behaving strangely. It began as signal static, not uncommon in deep drift space, with a subspace relay network thin to near absence. But this static had a quality she had never encountered before. It wasn't random. It cycled, irregular, but patterned, like breathing, like something enormous, just on the other side of whatever wall separated her present location from wherever this signal was originating, was inhaling and exhaling in slow, ancient rhythm. She ran the audio through her analysis suite. The suite returned an error code she had never seen. Format unrecognized. PRE Imperial Standard. Estimated encoding date. Error. Exceeds historical database range. Her hands were very still on the console. Her heart was not. She switched to manual analysis. Pulled up the oldest format library in the Dominion's historical archive database. A collection that dated back 9,000 years to the earliest days of galactic expansion. Cross-referenced the cycling pattern against every known communication protocol. It matched one. Terran Standard, circa 21,000 AGC. Pre-Exodus. Pre-Silence. Human. The structure she found on day 9, at the precise coordinates her map had indicated. Her first instinct was that she had made an error somewhere, because what the Kethera's sensors were showing her was impossible. A structure, yes, but not a ship, not a station. Something that had no clean category in any architectural database she had ever consulted. It was vast, and it was dark, and it was completely, absolutely engineered. She could see that in the geometry. The proportions were not natural. Nothing in the universe arranged itself into those angles without intention behind it. It was the size of a small moon, and it was made, as far as her sensors could determine, of something she had no instrument capable of properly analyzing. It did not respond to her hails. It did not scan her. It simply waited, as it had apparently been waiting for a very, very long time. And then, as she brought the Kethera to within 20 kilometers, the surface of the structure changed. Not dramatically, not violently. A single point of light appeared, dim, blue-white, pulse rate exactly matching the cycling signal she had tracked across 9 days and 200 light years. A door. It was the size of a standard docking bay, which made no sense given the scale of the structure around it. It was sized, she realized with a cold and careful clarity, for a single small ship. For a ship exactly like hers. For someone who had followed an exact path from an exact starting point to arrive at this exact location. For her. Inside, the interior of the structure was not dark. That was the first surprise. She had expected darkness, dead systems, cold metal, the accumulated silence of 20,000 years. What she found instead was light. Soft, warm, golden, emanating from no discernible source. Simply present the way sunlight is present, as though the structure had decided that whoever entered deserved to see clearly. The corridor was wide enough for 3 people to walk abreast. The walls were smooth and unmarked except for a single repeating element, a symbol, barely visible, pressed into the surface material at intervals of exactly 2 meters. She photographed it with her handheld scanner. The scanner identified it immediately, not because it was in the Dominion database, but because Voss had taught herself to read it. Ancient English script, the same word, repeated over and over down the length of every corridor she could see. Remember, she walked for 11 minutes. The corridor turned twice, gently, as though guiding her. She followed it because she had not come this far to stop at the threshold. She had come to know, even if knowing was terrifying, even if knowing changed everything, even if she walked out of here, a fundamentally different person than she had been when she walked in. The corridor ended in a chamber. The chamber was circular, perhaps 30 meters across, and in its center stood a pillar of light. Not a physical structure, literally a column of light, floor to ceiling, pulsing slowly at that same ancient rhythm she had tracked across the void. Around it, arranged in a perfect circle, were 12 terminals. Old, pre-galactic old, but active. Every screen lit, every interface waiting. And behind the pillar of light, barely visible, a shape. A chair, and in the chair, a figure. Not a human. Not exactly. Something that had been human once, or that was built from human memory, or that chose to present itself in human form as a courtesy. It was difficult to look at directly, not because it was frightening, but because the mind kept sliding off it, the way you can't quite look at a word too long before it stops looking like a word. It spoke, not in Dominion Standard, not in any language Voss should have been able to understand. But she understood it perfectly, in the way you understand something in a dream, not through the words but through the meaning underneath them. "We knew you would be the one," it said. "We have been watching your bloodline for a very long time, Vosralland. The capacity for patience, for seeing what others overlook, for following a thread no one else will touch. We built a map for you specifically, not because you were chosen in the way myths describe choosing, but because choice, examined closely enough, always reveals itself to have been inevitable. You were always going to be the one who looked. So we built something worth finding, the weight of knowing." She did not speak for a long time. When she did, her voice was level. Scientists train themselves in a levelness. It is a professional skill. It does not mean the thing behind the levelness is level. "What are you?" she asked. "The record," it said. Humanity encoded its memory into structure before it slept. The culture, the grief, the laughter, the catastrophic mistakes, and the moments of genuine grace. Not to be resurrected. Resurrection was a different project, and you have already encountered its complications. We are the part that was meant to be understood. The library, not the army. "Why now?" she asked. "Why is this waking up now?" "Because the trigger was pulled," it said simply. "You are not the first to find us, but you are the first to find us this way. Not through military operation, not through accident, but through scholarship, through the exact quality of attention we were hoping for. The other awakenings have been disruptive. We observe them. We chose to wait for a different kind of contact. We chose to wait for you." Voss looked at the 12 terminals, at the pillar of light, at the symbol repeating itself endlessly down the corridor she had walked. "Remember, what's in the archive?" she asked. "Everything," it said. 20,000 years of watching the galaxy grow without us. Our original history. Our failures. The things we were most ashamed of. The things we were most proud of. The exact sequence of decisions that led to the silence. And the one thing we believe matters most. Which is what? The light in the chamber shifted. Warmer. Almost kind. That the future is not written in code, it said. It is written in what you choose to remember. You have been mapping our breadcrumbs for 6 years. Archivist. You are exactly the right person to decide what the galaxy learns next. Voss sat down at the nearest terminal. Her hands were perfectly steady now. On the other side of the chamber, the light pulsed. Waiting. Patient. As it had always been patient. As it had been patient for 20,000 years. She began to read. Outside, in the void, the Velthara sat small and alone against the darkness. And across the hollow drift, very faintly, 11 relay towers that had been silent since before living memory began to hum. Not broadcasting. Not activating weapons. Not sending the signal that had terrified Commander Rivencall's crew, or the command cascade that had darkened colonies, or the single word cleanse that still haunted Dominion nightmares. Just humming. The way a library hums when someone finally opens a book. The galaxy, for the first time in 20,000 years, was about to learn something true.